BraveWords Records, home for Alcatraz, Bangalore Choir, Crimson Glory, Jack Starr, Voices of Extreme, Paul Diano's Warhorse, The Chris Slade Timeline, Rhett Forrester, Prophets of Addiction, Aska, and Lillian Axe. BraveWords Records, where music lives.
This is such an honor to have Canadian legend, a worldwide hard rock and heavy metal legend. Please welcome to BraveWords Streaming For Vengeance, Mr. Brian Vollmer from Helix Rock. You, sir.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Tim.
Pleasure is all mine. Now, we go way back. Helix goes way back. There's so much to talk about. The fact that you're still standing and still rocking and still relevant. It's a beautiful thing when you wake up in the morning, and actually it's always a good thing when you actually wake up in the morning, right?
That's true. Rock and roll is the fountain of youth.
Absolutely. Now you've got this brand new record, Scrap Metal, and no disrespect because I love you like an uncle. And it's like scrap metal is like it's old, but it's still useful, right? So that's no slang. It really is. You look at scrap, people use scrap metal all the time.
That's true. That's true.
So tell me about scrap metal building this beast, keeping the beast going.
Well, I had the title in my head, and then when I started to put the songs together for the album, I have folders of songs I've written over the years, and I never stopped writing. You see some artists from my time period, my peers, and they've quit writing, and then they try to jump back into it after 15 years of not doing it. But you know, it's a muscle like anything else. You got to keep doing it. So I'm always writing. I'm writing with different people. Whoever wants to write with me, I'm not really that particular. And so I got folders full of songs, and we wrote all these songs during the 80s when we were writing for Back for Another Taste of Wild in the Streets. And we never really finished off the songs, or we took them to William Saper, manager, and he kind of went, I don't like that one. And it kind of got nixed immediately. So we went and revisited some of those songs, and I let Sean Kelly hear a couple of them. Sean said, you should really finish off this song, you know? So I went back and we did a couple of rearrangements, and I rewrote some of the lyrics on Fast and Furious. And then Sean and I had this song called Stuck in the 80s. And what that song meant to us was that was a very special decade. We were a lot more free back then. You didn't have to watch what you said all the time. Nowadays, you know, you can't see anything. There's like 10 phones in your face spreading all over the internet. And so that's the attitude of what that song was about, which kind of summed up the album. So I went back to those demos in the 80s that we had written, and we rewrote 4 of the songs. And then I took songs that were on lesser known Helix albums, because after we left Capitol, you know, I was just trying to survive. And, you know, I didn't have a lot of money to put in a promotion. In fact, I didn't have any money to put in a promotion after I was done recording. And we cherry picked songs from B-sides, Half Alive, Old School. Old School was released just before COVID, so it kind of killed that whole project just because of what was going on in the world at that time. So I took the best songs from all those albums for the B-side of the CD, and that's where we started from. And you know, I had done a couple albums with Daryl, my bass player, Daryl Gray, and Aaron Murray in the past, and I brought those two guys together, and I forget, I had a name for them, something like the Gloomy Twins or something like that. No, it wasn't that name, but they really proved to be how can I say it? They really made all the songs sound great. Daryl knows the band, obviously, for playing with us since 1983. And Aaron, you know, he's on the cusp of where producing's going. He was a protege of Danny Broadbeck, who was working with Dolores O'Riordan. And Danny was the protege of Jack Richardson, who, as you know, did Guess Who, Bob Seger, Alice Cooper. So good lineage of producers there. I brought those two guys together, and they just immersed themselves in the project. And this is what we come up with. And very proud of this effort by not myself, but all people involved. We've always operated as a team. It's not just me, it's everybody involved in the project. So we come up with this, and I can tell by the feedback we're getting from interviewers and just fans in general, they really like the effort.
Well, there's a lot of bands these days that just want to go out and tour with an older record, play it start from finish. A lot of bands just don't want to make new music. They don't see the point. They think it's a waste of money. So it's I'm very proud of you, the fact that you actually came back with a record, because most bands don't want to come back with a new record.
Hey, you call me uncle, I can call you dad now.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Well, I got into it to write and to perform, and I never really understood artists that went, there's no money in it, so I'm not going to do it anymore, or artists that said, "Oh yeah, I do it for the fans," right? But they totally ignore the fans, and they never go out after the shows to talk to the fans. Uh, but I really did get into it to write songs. That's where I get the biggest charge in life. And I could retire. I got enough money to do that now. I got a couple houses and stuff. But for me, the biggest thrill I still get in life is to write a song or be on stage, to talk to the fans after the show. I just love that stuff. And when I'm standing on stage, when I'm standing there with fans after the show, I think, thank you, Lord. I'm so lucky to be here doing this. And when I'm on stage too, I always think this could be the last time. So, I give it all I got.
Oh, please don't say that. Do you ever think like a lot of the new bands? Well, I was around in the 80s, but I wasn't making music. So
Mhm.
there's like a little bit of a generation gap between myself and yourself. But my point is, it's like you actually went through the 80s, you worked through it. So all these bands that started to get through the 90s and the 2000s, they never had that experience, that learning curve. You know what I mean? I just think it's just a wealth. We all lived so much life in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, and then you look at some of these younger bands, they had none of that.
And they would love to have that too. It's not that they don't want to do that.
Right.
Uh, and I put it down to not having the bar scene like we had back in the 80s. In fact, I'm writing a book right now called The Golden Age of the Canadian Bar Circuit. And I actually flew out through COVID and I interviewed guys like Bill Henderson of Chilliwack and the guys in Prism. So Al Harlow from Prism. So we traveled right across country. In fact, Helix was the first band to travel from the Atlantic to the Pacific through the bars, and it's a huge country. So you pick up different attitudes, different perspectives. You get more eclectic in your thinking. You mature as an individual, not only in your musicianship, but from a personality standpoint. Like you had to learn to live with people on the road, and it was difficult because back then you didn't have TV or cell phones or computers. You were stuck in a room with a bed, a night table, and a dresser usually, and the bathroom down the hall. Maybe you had one in your room if you were lucky. So you had to learn how to deal with people and to get along with people. And we went out in the audience. We used to talk to our fans once again between the sets. And I think we had more roots in the community, let's say, the musical community. In fact, bars were the hub of, where people went to meet their future girlfriend, wife, people they went to school with, people they worked with. And nowadays that's gone. Now it's the donut shop.
But you mentioned a really key word, and it's whether you're a band or an individual in a band, it's like communication really means a lot. And you're right. Back then, you had to do something called converse to each other. Everyone wasn't looking at their phone and scrolling through this. It's like you actually had to deal with each other, just like just regular people. So, like, how has that mode of communication changed for you over time?
Well, it's kind of carried over for me. Like now after the show, we go out, we still talk to fans, and we get, for instance, on the last tour we did with Nazareth in the fall, I had a lot of people my age coming out bringing their kids, and the kids would say to me, "My dad turned me on to this music, and I grew up listening to Helix, and now here I am meeting you," and that's a real special feeling when people say that to me. But that connection, of talking to people, and in my first book, I always say we party with people, we drank with people, sometimes we even slept with our fans. So there was that tightness, and in the beginning of the band, my manager used to say to all of us, he'd go out there and try to get laid because if women come to the gig, then the men will soon follow. And that was true. We had a real mixed audience, this band. And we took care of our fans though. We wrote our fans, we phoned our fans, we hung out with our fans. We weren't the type of band to stick in our room between sets. We went down and wandered through the audience. The first album we put out, Breaking Loose, which was on our own label, H&S Records, Helix and Sipe. We sold between sets. I used to go down there and make deals with people on the album. And the first two albums, the second one was called White Lace and Black Leather. They sold about 15,000 copies, and that's a big factor, I think, in getting us signed to Capitol EMI in 1983.
Um, Definitely a lot of questions right there. But do you ever reflect? They're like Helix is part of a really exclusive, and that's with a capital E, club of bands from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I'm talking like the Scorpions, Judas Priest, like bands that are celebrating 40, 50 years as an actual entity. How do you've weathered the storm like most bands, like it's kind of like a lottery win that you're still alive.
Well, part of it is making sure that you watch every nickel and dime that you're spending. Some people sometimes criticize me for not spending money on this or spending money on that, but really, you can't make art if you don't have money. You can't record if you don't have money to go into the studio. So I was always very money conscious of where the money was going. And some people might have called me tight, but in my way of thinking, I was just trying to make sure that I had money left over that I could do future projects with the band, like recording, like touring. And I always set aside a certain amount of money, and this was taught me by William Sipe once again. I always set aside a certain amount of money that I made each year to improve something in the band, clothes, new band pictures, whatever. And I think that's really helped us survive. That's a big part of it, for bands at our level is just surviving and not going under because you got no money to tour or you can't, or you're worked into a corner over money. So money is very important. And I advise my students, because I teach a lot of vocal students nowadays, and I tell them, be careful where you're spending the money and make sure that it's spent wisely.
Now, growing up doing that particular role, that wasn't taught at any university. How did you learn? And was that your role from the get-go? It's like this, like someone actually has to take care of the economics of the band. Yeah, it's all about music, but at the end of the day, you're right. It has to function as a business.
Well, I credit that to William Sipe. Bill taught us a lot of things. He taught us how to perform. See, William Sipe was in two bands. He was in Poverty Train, which was a rock band, and he was in the Great Rufus Row Machine, which was a show band. And for people that don't know what the difference between a rock band and a show band, back on the circuit at that time, rock bands, they were the guys that played like Cream and Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. And they usually dressed in jeans and t-shirts. The show bands, would have matching outfits, have synchronized moves, and play mostly top 40 stuff. We became a combination of those two types of bands. We were a rock band with show band characteristics. We moved, we had synchronized moves and things like that. And Bill went to school for business, and so he taught us a lot of business things. He was always feeding us this self-help stuff and think positive. And my voice coach that I started going to in 1976, Ed Johnson, who also taught Daniel Lanois and the guys from Copper Penny, Major Hoople's Boarding House, Gilmore of Triumph. Ed Johnson, he was the youngest member ever of the New York Metropolitan Opera. He came from Ferguson, Ontario. And when Ed was down in New York, he became the tenor soloist for Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And Ed was always saying to me, think positive, think positive, think positive. When you need money, money will fall out of the sky. And so I think that positive attitude also helped me keep going in the music business because, you can get very down at times. That the music business is such that not every day is the big hit, not every day is the big gig. There's a lot of downtime in between where you just hate the person you're talking to on the phone and wish you didn't have to go through the BS. Um, and I think that's why a lot of artists commit suicide, to tell you the truth, because they have this real high of the big hit, and all of a sudden there's nothing for 2 years. But if you look at artists with longevity in the business, it's not ever a curve like this. If you were to make a graph of it, it's, they have a good time and then they go through lean periods and then they keep going, and like I said, the trick is to keep going during the lean times, and that's what we accomplished over the years.
Randy Bachman, that famous line, "You're only as good as your last record," from BTO. It means a lot, right?
That's true. And once again, getting back to having a following and having that person-to-person contact with our fans, when we did have those down times, it was the fans that kept us alive because we had that personal relationship with them, and they stuck with us rather through thick and thin. Whereas bands nowadays, they get a hit right in the basement. They're thrown out there by the record company. If they don't have a hit in the next album, onward and upward. They go on to, throw it against the wall. If it sticks like shit, then you go with it. If not, then on to the next thing. So they're at a real disadvantage. I think young bands nowadays would give their eye teeth to be able to live the life that we lived back then in the 80s and the 70s.
Right. No, absolutely. Now, there was a lot of good times, which I would love to discuss with you. But first, how did you manage the tough times? What did you do, like mentally, when it was the dry spells? I'm not talking like Kurt Cobain, but like, how did you manage that?
Well, I think that faith had a lot to do with it. Faith in a higher power to get me through. There was times when I was very depressed, especially in the 90s, and uh, I used to call them my dark days, and I get up just feeling angry and mad that here I was with gold and platinum albums like the ones in the background there, and yet I didn't have two nickels to rub together, and I was working at Manpower, and I got the shit kicked out of me one night working in a variety store, and I had a lot of bad things happen. But there's an old German saying that a hammer shatters glass and forges steel, and you just got to keep going. I don't know how to explain it any other way. You just put one foot in front of the other one, you keep going. And then I met my wife, and that really helped me get back into things because my wife pulled me out of that, and my wife has been my anchor for most of my life and career.
As they say, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world, right?
Right.
Now,
Well,
sorry.
Linda worked at the original Hard Rock Cafe in London, England, so she is a rock and roll person just like I am. And she served everybody from Telly Savalas to Joan Rivers to Muhammad Ali. Uh, Neil Murray used to rent the one room in her flat. In fact, I was out there shoveling snow today and I had one of those Russian hats on that Neil had given it Linda when Whitesnake played in Russia. And I still got that hat. And when it snows, I think of Neil.
Now, going back to the whole business thing, when those first two records came out, and then this opportunity of actually putting your business into a label, capital EMI. Tell me about that transition. And obviously, that's when things started to really skyrocket for Helix.
Yeah, well, it was really building for us through the bars. The first two albums were instrumental in getting us signed. The first album, Breaking Loose, got airplay through a guy named Joe Anthony at Kiss K-Mac out of San Antonio, Texas. And we did our first three-date tour of Texas. Our first date in the United States in a concert situation was actually with Dave Menenchetti and Y&T.
Awesome.
And a lot of people don't know that. Great guy. And Joe gave us a lot of airplay, and so did a guy named Chris Johnson, who was the program director at Emerald College. On the next album, which was produced by Lachlan McFadden, first one was done by Bob Morton, but the second was done by Lachlan McFadden, and we had a hit with Women, Whiskey, and Sin in England, and it went to number one on, I forget what the label was, right? But we got a lot of press through Mark Putterford at Sounds Magazine, and also Paul Suter at Kerrang, and that got the attention of EMI, and forget the guy's name, but he talked Dean Cameron, who was the president of Capitol Records at that time, into taking a second look at the band, and then eventually we got signed to the American label, and that was Dean Cameron's decision. He didn't think that the Canadian company would have enough money to push us properly, so he got assigned to Capitol EMI USA, and we were never ever signed to a Canadian label, which a lot of people find surprising too.
What was your first thought when you held No Rest for the Wicked in your hands? Like, wow.
Geez, I can't remember now. Everything was moving so fast. People asked me what I thought of certain things, like our first Gold album and stuff like that. But when we found out the album went gold, it was and that was on the Walking in Razor's Edge album. We were backstage at Meadowlands Coliseum playing with Rush on the Grace Under Pressure tour. And I have it actually on film, and somebody in the background said, yeah, in 2 weeks we're going to go platinum. And everybody laughed. And in 2 weeks we went platinum in Canada. And I think then they put us on the Thunder 7 tour with Triumph.
To this day, August the 17th, 1984, I was 17 years old. I'm rushing like a madman at the CNE Stadium. I wake up and my hand is on the bar, and I'm watching some of the most legendary bands on the heavy metal hurricane: Kick-Axe, Quiet Riot, Helix, and the Scorpions. So I think we might have met in another world. I literally was right in front of the stage. My ears bled for years. One of the greatest, you'll talk to fans, that might be their greatest concert moment of all time. And in Toronto history, it has to be shortlisted. And you were one of the highlights of that show.
That was a great venue, CNE Stadium. I think we played there with Ronnie James Dio as well. It's the only time we played with the Scorps. But yeah, and I remember looking out over the audience, and my dad was there, my mom was there. I think I have pictures backstage with them. And it was an unreal moment going out there where they put you in a little golf cart thingy and they take you out to the stage. And yeah, it was a concert that not only you, but a lot of people have brought up to me at the merch booth, talking to me, saying, I was at that concert. And it was a special moment for sure.
Now, when Long Way to Heaven came out, I was like everyone, video was really important. It was what I mean. It was essential. Kids are all shaking, and Deep Cuts the Knife. I thought like things would double, and Helix would double in size again. What happened with Long Way to Heaven, and was it issues with the label, or tell me?
Well, Deep Cuts the Knife went to double breaker status in the United States on radio, which means that in our genre of music, there was 2/3 of all stations in the United States playing it at one time. It went to number one in Sweden, and we toured right around Sweden inside the Arctic Circle. In fact, Lenny Stout, I'm sure you know that name, came over and to watch us tour and have fun with us. And I won't say any more than that, because we all know Lemmy, or knew Lemmy. And we toured Canada, I think, in our first headline tour. I think the difference between that and the album previous was that we had gotten all the airplay on a ballad, and ballads never sell as much as a up-tempo song like, say, Rock You. And there was less excitement over that. And down at the Capitol Towers in Los Angeles, they were kind of shuffling around people at the top. They had a guy named, I'm trying to think of, can't remember the guy's name, but he was the president of the record company. And we had Bill Bartlett, who was our in guy at the tower. And this guy used to ferret people out at the company for drugs. And he found out Bartlett was doing drugs, so he had demoted him to like bum boy in the mailroom. And because Bartlett was very popular at the label. And then he walked up behind me and he jabbed with a pig stabber and cattle prod. Bartlett had a nervous breakdown and ended up suing Capitol, and they both ended up losing their jobs. And we didn't know it at the time, but our career was pretty much over at that point once we lost Bartlett at the company. Because you have to understand that at any record company, big record company back then, they had maybe 4 or 5 people at the most at the top of the company, and they all had the way they got moved up in their job was to have signed a band that had a hit album, and so guys at record companies would actually try to, sync another band at the same record company, which sounds totally ridiculous, but it happened all the time, and any record company at that time too, when they were going to a radio stations were being hit up by maybe 10 labels a week, and they could only add one song. So if you were number two priority at a label, you may as well have been 2 million and two. And so Wild in the Streets came along, and I think they gave it kind of a half-ass shot at it, and then that was it. It was pretty much over for us at Capitol Records.
And what an incredible song. It's like, and when you're writing, are you writing for radio? Is that in the back of your head going, ah, this might be great for radio. This should be the third track on the record, or whatever the science was.
I don't think we geared ourselves towards radio, but I think the people around us definitely did because they were motivated to find a hit song. So record companies are kind of animal that if somebody has a hit, they want everybody to do another hit like that. I remember that when we had Rock You Out, Capitol kind of leaned on Tom Cochran. He came out with what was that rock song?
Life,
Uh,
life is a highway.
oh no, no, that was a hit. No, it was something with rock in it, right? And anyway, uh, I just wrote songs that made me feel good. I gravitated towards more commercial stuff anyway because you're only a product of your influences. And when we started out, we were basically a roving jukebox. You had to be to survive in the bars because that's what people wanted to hear, stuff that was familiar off the radio. And so we played everything from Bay City Rollers to Aerosmith. But like I said, we always gravitated towards the heavier stuff. And and I think that's why fans liked us so much when they heard us because we weren't playing whatever was on the radio at the time. We were playing, Ted Nugent and Aerosmith and things like that.
Do you remember the moment on stage when you actually played an original song and you got like the proper fan reaction to one of your songs and not Stranglehold by Ted Nugent or something?
Well, there was many moments like that, but I think we really found our sound when we wrote "Check Out the Love," which is a song that appears in "No Rest for the Wicked," and we wrote that down in the Bronx while we were touring on a disastrous tour of New England down in the United States, where it was like nobody at any of the shows. And I remember Paul and I were in this hotel room. It was just like we were scared to go outside. And we wrote that song. Up to then, we were searching for our sound. First two albums are kind of all over the place. But I still look back in fondness of those albums that, initially I used to look back, oh, don't want those albums out there, right? But, they're all part of your career and part of your life as a writer and as a musician and a performer. And so now I look back on them, like I said, with fondness. And some of the songs are actually pretty good, I think.
Let's lighten things up. I call it the Brave Words Rapid Fire, and just some left field questions. Not that this hasn't been fun, but this has been really fun. And the moment that you decided that music was your life, and did you have family support?
Nah, not at first, I didn't. In fact, I was raised on a farm, and we used to have a radio up on the beam above my head where I used to milk cows by hand when I was about 9 years old. And anyway, my dad'd be at the far end of the barn, and I'd be singing Blue Suede Shoes, or I'd be singing Ride With Me by Steppenwolf or something at the top of my lungs. I could hear my old man at the far end of the barn going, "Shut the fuck up!" So I don't think that was a motivating factor. Um, and then I got into choirs, and when I finally got in a band, Helix, and I was working at Snyder's Meats in Kitchener, a very good paying job. I worked in order fill, and I was making really good money. I had a brand new car, and I remember going out for a ride with my dad, and I was trying to break it to him that I was thinking of going on the road for $40 a week. And so I told my dad, I didn't tell him the $40 part, but I said, Dad, I'm thinking of going out there and playing on the road. And my dad really surprised me. He said, well, son, he says, if you never try it, you'll never know. And that was enough. I think if he would have said, if he would have said, oh, you're not going to do that, I probably wouldn't have done it.
Wow, that's a pretty moving statement.
Yeah. And
Wow.
then my dad was very supportive of as time went on, you know. I think he wished we would have made more money though.
Well, we all wish. But that must have been the moment when he saw you at the CNE with the score. Like, was he familiar with at least some of the rock world, or was he just stuck in some other time zone? Was he a fan of rock music?
Well, my dad really didn't even listen to music.
Yeah.
Like we used to have this pile of records at home that my grandfather got. My grandfather was very much in music. In fact, my first exposure to music was through my grandfather. We listened to stuff like Johnny Cash, Ernest Tubb, Kitty Wells, Patsy Cline, and it was country stuff. Jimmy Reeves. And my dad had all these records at home. I don't remember ever hearing my dad play a record. He was too busy working. And yeah, he didn't really know the music. He was just proud of me, and that was enough.
Who is your rock star?
My rock star? Well, actually, I actually got to meet my rock star that I looked up to, and it was John K. Steppenwolf. And I played with Steppenwolf about 3 times, and he was just everything I thought he would be.
It's remarkable that although some say it's another source, but Heavy Metal Thunder. We heard Heavy Metal Thunder for the first time, right? Born to Be Wild. Wow, and you got to play with him and perform and meet and hang with him. That's amazing.
Yeah, and he was talking about guys like Hoyt Axton. I'm going, yeah.
Just as a
A
side,
lot of people don't realize this, but Steppenwolf started in Toronto. They were originally called Sparrow.
yes.
And I think who wrote Born to Be Wild? It was a weird name. It wasn't John Kay.
Gil Moore told me that he learned how to drum and sing at the same time by listening to Suki Suki from
Yeah.
Steppenwolf. That was his training song. Somebody around him that was like, and that's where we got that from. Wow, amazing. Have you ever asked for an autograph?
Oh yeah. Lots of Trailer Park Boys.
Yes, of course.
But yeah. Some people I wish I would have asked autographs from. I was a big Joe Cocker fan too. I love Joe Cocker. I got to meet Joe Cocker in New York on his 40th birthday. And Don Zimmerman, who was going out with Sheen Easton at the time, he introduced me to Joe Cocker. We were on the Avenue of the Americas down in New York City. And I remember Cocker went, yeah, man, I'm not really here. I just smoked a real big joint of Hawaiian, man. I'm not really here. And then Zimmerman took me into his office. He said, I got to play you a new song by heart. See what you think about it. So he played this song, and me trying to be, impressed. I went, well, it's a good song, but I don't think it's got lasting power. What about love? Boy, was I wrong.
Wow. Now, what do you think about the vinyl craze? And do you remember your first vinyl purchase?
I sure do. I bought it for $3.99 at Hayes Hardware in Listowel, and it was American Woman by the Guess Who, and I wore the grooves off that thing. I think vinyls come back for one simple reason, and that is because you can actually see the artwork and you can hold it in your hands. Like, who do you see ever take a friggin' CD and or a digital download?
Yeah, I know. I love it.
But artists spend so much time in the artwork for their albums. I know on this one we did, and we spent a lot of time on it. And so, fans want to look at that. I think, as much as the internet is big nowadays and everybody thinks that it's going to change everything, one thing that hasn't changed is that people, when they buy stuff, like to fondle it in their hands a lot of times and roll around and look at it and,
What was your first concert?
I'm trying to remember if it was either Lighthouse and Foot and Cold Water, or it was James Gang and Edgar Winter and White Trash with Jerry Lacroix.
Well, this is a great question for you because what your views on CanCon and did it help? Did it help Helix?
Well, yes and no. And I'll tell you why I say that, because for a band like Helix now to release a new album of new songs, you think that CanCon would help us get airplay on the radio, but it's quite the opposite effect. What happens is classic rock stations, for the most part, 98.1 here in London is the exception, but for most part, classic rock stations won't play new music. So what happens is they force them to uh, uh, play you, so they'll play like Rock You for the 400th millionth time, right? And whereas I'd rather have them play some of the new stuff and give it a chance out there, but that's life. So it works for you, and then there's always the perspective that because they are forced to play you, people tend to look at it being not as good as the other stuff that's on the radio.
Did you find in late 70s, in the 80s, when hard rock and heavy metal was becoming like a really big force, that there was a community in Canada? Like, did you get along with Rush and Triumph? And what do you think about the fact that I'm still in shock that Rush is coming back and even Triumph. But back to the community, was there like, did you feel like you were part of like the Canadian hard rock community, Helix and all these other bands?
Well, we kind of modeled ourselves after Rush from the perspective that Rush went out there and they just toured and toured and toured. And getting back to money once again, I think they had the same bus for like 5 years. And I heard a story where they played something like 70, 80 dates in a row once. And we didn't do that many, but we played 40 once. And I tell you, it's killer. You're playing every night. It's one thing to do it in the bars. It's quite another to do one night stands where you're driving 6 hours a night. Um, so we use them mostly as models because we didn't know a lot of these bands personally. Moxie was going down to Texas, and we ended up going down to Texas. As for Triumph, we toured with Triumph eventually. They also went to Triumph, and were one of the reasons they broke in Texas was once again Joe Anthony. He loved Canadian music. So and one band that's always left out of the equation is the Stampeders. The Stampeders knocked down a lot of doors for Canadian bands. They were a great friggin' Canadian band. I had the good fortune of playing with Rich Dawson before he passed away, and nicest guys in the world. So yeah, we took, then there was Flood. I remember we played at the Cornet in Kitchener, and we were playing down in what was called the Pit, where all the St. Joyce used to hang out down in the basement, and they were up in the crown room where all the recording acts played. And Brent blew the head on his amp, and the Pillinger, I forget what Pilling played guitar. He brought down his amp and let Brent use it downstairs so we could play. So yeah, we had that camaraderie. There was other bands like there was Carlos Di Battista, I think his name was, from Vehicle. There was Lynx. There was a lot of Canadian bands out there that time. Major Hoople's Boarding House, Copper Penny. So we took a little bit from all those bands. Charity Brown.
And when you got to the point where you could actually pick and choose your openers, were you more fond of the Canadian bands, or did you try to give these young bands a lift up?
Well, that's a bit of a myth. It's mostly the promoters that pick the opening acts because they got their time as far as money goes during the concert, right? So we really didn't have a lot of say in that. So if that question is relevant. I remember the only time that we really had a chance to, we were asked out in Vancouver if we let Wasp open for us. And then they kind of went on and kind of screwed us over, but that's life.
Now, you have been the mainstay in Helix since day one. Tell me about the challenges of actually trying to keep a band together, because there's been various incarnations of Helix over time.
Well, a lot of it has to do with money, how much you can pay people, obviously. If you got no money to pay people, it's hard to keep, especially good musicians in the band. Not saying that we didn't have great musicians, but sometimes people just had, where personalities clash, things like that. So part of my job as a leader of the band is to, part psychiatrist and part knowing how to deal with people and talking to people that they feel involved with the project. And that I got a great bunch of guys in the band now. And if there's ever a problem, they come to me and they don't feel afraid to tell me if something's bothering them or if they need something. And we try to work it out. And if we can't, I just come up front and I tell them. A lot of it too is when you have somebody into the band. I learned this over time. You set the ground rules up front, and that way, when it does come to disagreement, you go, well, look, if this isn't what you agreed to. But yeah, we've been through a lot of players over the years for sure. But during the '80s, we had a pretty solid lineup between myself, Paul, Daryl, Brent, and Fritz, and that didn't change for I think from 1983 to 1989, and
Was
then.
was there one that sticks out that when they walked in the room, there was like an immediate connection? It's like, this is my writing partner, or I think we're going to get along beautifully.
Well, Paul and I were the writing team, and Brent to a lesser extent. But Fritz, who passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, he was one of those guys that you could be at the darkest moment of your career and he'd make a joke and everybody'd be laughing. He was just that type of individual. And then he had the accident where he fell off the ladder. And I think his personality changed a little bit. He had a major concussion. People don't realize this, but he had a major concussion. He broke a couple ribs. I think he broke his back. He had lost his sense of smell, his sense of taste. And yeah, it must have been so hard for him for that last year and a half until he got cancer. And then he got cancer. His last gig was up at the Hard Rock Casino in Ottawa. And I remember on the way back, he just laid on the seat and he was in so much pain and he went straight to the hospital. And, and then he he didn't want people to come visit him. And I used to just drive down there and just show up and then he'd have to take me in. And once I did that, then he was cool with it, right? But for the most part, he didn't want people to see him, deteriorate with cancer. And I miss him every day. He was, not saying that I don't love Jamie, my new drummer, but he was just really a special human being, Greg Hines.
Yeah, well, that was the last time I saw you in person, and condolences to this day. He was like, he lit up a room. He was like, what a wonderful spirit.
Yeah, and he just attracted people to him, like especially chicks. They just flocked to him. But he'd do the funniest damn things, and just have you rolling. I remember one time we had to travel up. We played for the Hells Angels in Pont Rouge, Quebec, and we had to drive straight from there to Phoenix, Arizona, and up to Window Rock, where the Navajo Indians had hired us. And anyway, the air conditioning went out on the motorhome, and so we decided in typical, how could I say it, misogynistic fashion to have a farting contest. So we're buying the warm Coors beer and burritos and like whatever could make those gases erupt. And we got all the way down to Arizona, and by this time, we'd been drinking for 2 days in the motorhome, and everybody was, on growth of, needed a shave and was greasy looking. And so we're standing in the lineup at McDonald's, and everybody's staring at us. And Fritz has got on these leopard skin spandex pants. And he's got his pipes, he's got the cut off shirt and his pipes and stuff, right? And everybody, and he's got his groovy glasses on. I think there was like two hearts, right? And everybody's staring at him, and he just lifted his leg and he let one rip, and everybody just broke up. Well, at least we did. I don't think the mums and dads and kids did, but I could do something like that, but he could.
Were you paying attention in the 80s when the dress code started to change? And do you remember having discussions or talking to your wife or trying to figure out, well, we sound great, but we need to look even better?
Well, when we got signed, we were wearing clothes and we went and, we showcased for 6 or 7 labels and they all turned us down. And it wasn't until we went across from the gasworks to the S&M shop over there and got all this leather gear that we got signed by Capitol. They took a second look at us. It was the same song, same band. So clothes were very important to us, and we were always trying to be on the cutting edge of where fashion was going. We didn't always, we weren't always successful, but we were always trying to do that. And to this day, clothes are important for the band. And Sype used to say to us, look, you have to be able to walk into Tim Hortons with the same clothes on that you walk on stage with. You got to be real. And so at first it was like, you just felt like you were standing right out in the crowd. But after a while, we just, like nowadays, I walk in and I don't even realize how I look, but I'm a little bit different looking than
You're beautiful. You
I'm
know,
thank
one of my favorite moments as a
you.
fan, um, one of my favorite moments in the 80s as a fan was when the US Festival aired. And did you watch the US Festival? Did you think we should be on that festival stage?
No, I didn't watch it. Sorry.
But you know what I'm talking about?
Not really. I've heard of the US Festival, but I have known nothing about it.
Well, Van Halen, Ozzy, Scorpions,
What year was that?
1984, 85. It was a huge 500,000 people.
I think I remember, didn't Van Halen fly over the crowd in a helicopter or something?
Yeah, they got paid like $500,000
I
for the
think I did.
gig. They were all fucking wasted, but that was the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Last question, Brian, is what's left to conquer?
Well, I get up and I just do the same old every day. I get in front of the computer, I answer fan mail. I think what the next project will be. I'm always writing songs. Like I said, I was up in Toronto on Monday, in fact, writing with Sean Kelly. We started a couple new songs up there. And now I'm working this album. I'm working the 50th album still for Crown Recordings. Um, so just keep doing what I'm doing, I guess. I'm 71 in June, but I don't feel that old. I think that doing music, doing what you love in life keeps you feeling young. And I exercise a lot. I don't smoke, I don't drink. I'm sure you can relate. And
Yes.
I walk when I'm down in Florida because I'll be going back on Monday. I have a house there. I live in Florida for 6 months of the year. And I go out walking with my dog in the jungle in the morning, and we do 5 miles before lunch. And that's every day.
Beautiful.
Just I guess doing the same thing I always did. Maybe get a little traveling in, maybe spend a little bit of the money I've made in my life. I'm looking at buying an old '69 Cadillac Eldorado. Don't tell my wife though.
Okay. Well, they always say you're living the dream, but you're making the dream.
I am living the dream. I guess I'm making the dream. You make your own bed, as they say.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see you on Sunday. All the best, and
Yeah, it'd be
talk
great.
again.